All right, hello, you two. Welcome back to the Eric's Reviews channel and specifically our Messengers of Hermes show. I'm joined once again by Logan,
Hello.
and we are going to be talking episode 7. I want to ask your opinions right away, Logan, on what you thought of the episode, just very broadly, and yeah.
Um, like always, I didn't like it. It was definitely better than last week's episode, but it still wasn't the greatest. And I will say, I was thinking about this over the week. Um, I wanted to make it clear that when I dislike the stuff in the show, it's not the actors and actresses. I think they do a wonderful job with what they're given. I think the scenes and the music and everything is just amazing. It's just the writing for me that really upsets me, like last weekend or week. So I don't want anyone thinking like I'm dogging somebody just because I think they're bad when it's clearly not their fault. So now that I got that through, let's continue.
I mean, I agree. I think it's almost more apparent in this episode than the last episode for what you talked about. Like, I feel like
Yes.
in this episode, there was a lot more to work with in terms of like making it look very pretty and actually doing things with the visuals,
Yeah.
doing things with the music. There was much more like heightened emotional moments or just bigger set pieces. That music was much more important in this episode compared to the
Yes.
last.
Yeah. No, definitely a lot better.
And this is something consistently, I think that throughout the entire episode was the music was really good. I think this is the best the music's been for all 7 episodes, for me that I can remember specifically. But yeah, so just getting straight into the episode, I'll start with you, Logan. What did you think of their interpretation of doing Krusty from the book?
Christy as the character and the way they had the actor look, I think they did a wonderful job. That is more or less what I would think of when I saw Krusty. Wished he was like a little taller looking than how they had him in the show. Either just get a taller actor or maybe add some movie magic to it. I mean, it is Disney, but I think they did very good with Krusty himself.
I I'm kind of on the fence because I like the portrayal by the actor. I thought the personality worked pretty well.
Hmm.
I just thought physically Krusty probably should have been a bit more, I don't know, like a physical presence, kind of like the way you feel like Ares is in the show. Like, because specifically the way like it happens in the book is like he quite literally takes Annabeth and sets her in one of these water beds and or like overpowers Percy. Percy knows he can't beat him in like a straight fight. So I do agree, like I think Krusty should have been taller. I would have
Hmm.
liked it to be more like a almost giant appearance almost, but probably not that scape of things. But
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting, and I think we're both kind of thinking the same. I hated the way that this character and this plotline was introduced into the show. I was
Yes. Yeah.
shocked that this was even in this episode because last episode we were talking about, or maybe we didn't talk about it in the episode. I don't remember exactly, but I remember thinking like, okay, well, we're not getting Krusty then in the show because there's no point to have his character anymore, right?
Yeah.
The whole point of
Mhm.
Krusty and that whole plotline that we see at the beginning of the show is because they don't know where the underworld is, and so they're basically getting attacked by some kids, and they again stumble into this shop, and that's how they figure out where the underworld
Yeah.
is.
It was by pure chance. It
Yeah,
wasn't, oh, they go here and they know what's here like they
yeah,
did in the show. It's just trying to get away from a dude with I think it was a kid with a knife. He had like a switchblade or something. They were trying to
yeah,
run because the Percy sword and Annabeth's knife don't do anything to normal human beings.
yeah.
So I get that would be hard to implement. I mean, I wouldn't say it was far fetched, but it would be a little harder to do nowadays. Plus, depending on how you had the person look, I'm sure Disney would get into a whole political, racial problem with
Yeah.
whoever it was, whether it was white, African, Hispanic, or whatever. It just caused a big problem. So I understand their adaptation to it and change. I just wish they did it a little bit differently.
I'm going to be honest. I think, given what they already did in the last episode, so the point of this storyline's already, there's no point, right? Like, there's no
No.
real point to this outside of, okay, in the book, it's a lot of showing that Percy can think on his feet, right? Of him being clever in the moment.
Yep.
Whereas a lot of our stuff in the show, it's been like focusing on how they're clever before they get to the fight, like planning and
Yeah,
stuff.
they're clever together. Because
Yeah.
in the book, they don't know who Krusty is.
Yeah.
They just well, like we said, it was just a surprise visit. They didn't expect to go in here. But in the show, they know what's going on. They know who he is. I'm gonna be honest. I'm not the biggest mythology fan for Greek stuff, I know a decent amount, but I've never heard of him other
Yeah.
than in the Percy Jackson books. So I was very surprised, like how they're like, "Oh, I know exactly who you are," but they don't know some of the other people in the previous episodes.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna get to that in a second because I have something I really want to talk about that because I think that's actually a
Mhm.
big point of the show that's starting to very much annoy me. But
Mhm.
I also want to just like I just don't think this sequence was needed at all, right?
No.
Like for me personally, because you have to think the reason this was in here is for book fans, right? It's for book fans to go, oh, this is the waterbed sequence. It's still in here, right?
Yeah.
But for me, it's like I would rather you cut it out because it doesn't need to be there anymore because you've
Mhm.
fixed how do we get to the underworld in the last episode, even though I maybe not didn't like how we got there. It
Didn't
still
prefer it, yeah.
happened, right? So it's already there,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah,
need
I'm
this
I'm
part.
yep, I much preferred and, spoilers if you haven't read the book and you plan on reading it now, so if you do plan, stop here. But I kinda preferred the version where they go to the, oh, what was it? Performance studio or whatever it
Yes,
was,
it's
and they
something
meet
like that.
Car
Yeah,
yeah, they meet Charon, and I was like they had that whole little talk about he's like, "I don't get paid enough by Hades. I'm getting paid the same as I did 3,000 years ago." Oh, we'll talk to him about a pay raise. I was like, I kinda like that. It would have been some good for what, this show's really good at doing, Marvel
yeah,
comedy. It was very lighthearted in the sense in the book. It was also a very serious moment at some points, but I just wish they had kept it that way because the Krusty, cool to see Krusty, like you said, for book fans, it's like, "Oh my god, I remember the scene. I didn't think it'd be in here." I much rather have had the, performing arts studio one.
yeah. So I think the problem becomes it's like we really don't get to flesh out the Krusty storyline, but then we also don't get to flesh out the Charon stuff either. So what you really get is we get two different characters that really don't get as much time as they probably should have gotten, right? Because Charon
Mhm.
later on is going to get some stuff, and he's not even really a character. Like
No.
his role in this story is almost completely gone. So I personally didn't understand why they did that. I mean, I do, but I don't, right? To me, it doesn't really make sense to me. I think they should have just cut out this entire sequence at the beginning and just
Yeah,
gone with
no, it
what
was
happened in the book, and it would have made more sense. But
yep.
and then so even okay, so that's just the setup, right? So we're getting into the Krusty section, and one thing that I've really started to dislike in the show, it was fine at the beginning, is that our characters always know what the mystery or the monster they're facing is every
Mhm.
single time. We go back from the beginning of their journey. The first, so episode 3, it was Medusa. Episode 4, it's the like mother of monsters. They already know who she
Mhm.
is, even though she's in disguise. They already have figured it out, and all of that. The next episode, it's well, there wasn't really a mystery. They just knew it was like a trap or whatnot. But then you have the Lotus Hotel, which they already knew. And now you have this
Yep.
episode. You already know what it is. It's like it just takes away all the mystery, takes all of the mystical stuff that you get when reading Percy Jackson because you're sitting here going,
Mhm.
you're going into this figuring out what these things are, how to defeat them with the characters. It's just
Yeah.
more interesting, right? When you're telling us everything that's going to happen before it happens, it's not interesting anymore.
It's not, no.
Like you think about even the Krusty sequence. The Krusty sequence is again they fall into it basically, and it's Percy having to react to the situation, figure out who this person really is, and then how do you figure out how to solve the situation. It just works better. It's more interesting. And so that's my complaint because that's consistently happened the entire season. And
Yep.
so if there's a season 2, which I'm assuming there will be, I
There's already
hope
been
they
some
stop
spoilers
doing
about
that.
that.
But
I hope so, yeah. No, I mean, for book fans already knowing, they read the book, I get it, they're gonna know what's going on. But for the people who haven't read the books, all these surprise, like, actors and actresses, like, okay, Medusa, if you know some Greek mythology, you might understand, okay, wow, look at that. There's a stone statue. That's probably that creepy hair snake lady.
yeah, let me stop you right
But
there. Medusa, by the way, just before you keep going, Medusa
mhm.
is the one that I think that makes the most sense to do what they did. The rest of them, I don't think make
Yeah,
any sense
no.
to do that. But continue.
Yeah, hers makes sense because if you start to see a bunch of statues on a trail where you're not supposed to be, but I know it's different in the book. I mean,
Yeah,
you put 2 and 2 together, you're
yeah.
gonna understand it. But Echidna, or how you say her name? The mother of
I
monsters.
struggle with her name. That's why I didn't say
Yeah,
it.
no, I don't yeah, whatever her name is. Oh my god, it's just they did it so quick.
Yeah,
Like, I get they had some trouble, but they did it a lot quicker than they did it in the book. And then with Krusty, they knew before they even went in there as if,
yeah.
like, there was some demigod forum on the internet to where they can say, "Oh, hey, by the way, XX Street in California or wherever they are, that's Krusty's place." He's his actual name. I forget the actual name.
It's
Uh,
something Polly something, I think. I'm not sure. That's why I stick
Prometheus
with
or something.
Krusty.
Yeah,
That's why I stick with Krusty.
yeah. It's just they knew who he was immediately. And I'm sorry, but if you just went into a building and you'd never seen the guy before, how would you know who it is?
I will answer this because I think there is an answer. The
Okay.
answer is in the Hermes car. Hermes specifically gave them instructions as to where the underworld
Oh,
was, and so I'm
that's
assuming
true.
that's who they know the character is. I just dislike that they're doing that. I dislike that they're
That
giving
makes
our group
yeah.
all the information beforehand.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I didn't even think of that. But no, it
So,
does suck that they're getting all this information beforehand, including with all the other ones.
so yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm just looking at my notes just to see if I had anything I really need to talk about. But again, it's just Percy goes up, confronts him. They talk about a second, and one thing I thought that was kind of interesting is talking about how these beds do make you fit in more or less, which I thought was something that's interesting is because like Percy is someone that struggles with fitting in because he isn't like a lot of the Greek demigods that he's been around because he hasn't had that knowledge of what everything is more or less. So and that's
Mhm.
something that's a very running theme of this episode specifically is Percy's identity and all that. So I thought that was a nice way to like bring that into the episode. But it's kind of undercut by how lackluster this whole thing plays out. It's just everything is solved instantly. Annabeth
Yep.
comes out, she has her invisible hat on, and they push him into the bed. It's just like as a book reader, as we are, and we know how this plays, it's just not
It's
interesting.
disappointing
It's
to see it nowhere near
disappointing.
as scary.
It's frustrating. Like I don't, and the other part of this that I really again continues to frustrate me. So after all of this goes down, and they whatever. It's the fact that a Grover again does nothing. He just comes in at the end and is like, "Oh, is it safe now?" It's like, Grover, why are you here? Like, and I've noted this even by the end of this episode.
Mhm.
If Grover, let's say Grover had died in a car accident at the end of episode 3, nothing changes in the story outside of like, oh, they think Clarice took the bullet, which
Yeah, other than the whole Ares, staying with Ares, he hasn't been there anyways.
and it's like that didn't really add anything to the story anyway. So it's like, I don't know. I'm just at this point where I'm just so frustrated with the character of Grover because they constantly do nothing with the character. They'll try and set things up and then they won't pay it off. It doesn't come up ever again. It's just gone. It just feels like a waste of time.
And the whole Pan thing in
Yep.
the Lotus Hotel. That was an absolute waste of what was it, 4 or 5 minutes of plot.
Yeah. Like
That was so unnecessary.
you go back to that, it's like it didn't matter. Like none of that mattered. The only thing that they were trying to do is, oh well, you don't forget as much as if you're with another person, and it's like, okay,
Yeah, no, that made no sense. Uncle Ferdinand back in episode 3 made more sense, or whatever his name was.
yeah. And
That was
so
better.
I'm just sitting here. I'm like, this is just whatever. It's just, I don't know. It just feels lazy. It just feels like we took a very uncreative way of doing this. If you're gonna change it, and yeah. So more or less, they make it to the underworld, which is just like a back closet, more or less. It's just like, okay. Um. Also, one else thing to point out is that Percy gives them all a pearl. So he gives one to Annabeth and one to Grover for them to hold on to, just in case they gotta make a quick escape or whatever, which is smart.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be something I'm not going to like as we go forward with certain plot line, but
Yeah.
But yeah, also something else I wanted to point out because there's a line that Annabeth says when they basically leave Krusty, which I also find is interesting. I don't know if you would actually leave Krusty alive, given that he traps kids and kills them.
Yep. Yeah, I say that was kind of weird that they did that.
But I thought it was interesting is like because Krusty keeps talking, Annabeth's like, "Well, be lucky we didn't kill you or basically take your head off," which is a nice little like wink to the book, and it's like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's supposed to be a wink to the book and like all that, but to me it just came off as, okay, you know what the source material is, and yet you choose to adapt it poorly. is how I basically because this is the intro coming off of episode 6, by far me and Nickerson's least favorite episode of so far. It just comes off very hollow because it's like, oh yeah, they know what happens in the book, but they're just choosing not to do it. Like
Yeah. And you can't tell me they're trying to go some new pacifist way they don't in the books, because they chop Medusa's head off still. They kill the Fury with Medusa's head,
Yeah.
and just everything they've done through the other parts of the episodes. It's like you can't just say like they're peaceful all of a sudden, because we know they're not.
Yeah. Agreed.
They have to fight to survive. This is a survival of the fittest themed like world for them.
Yeah. And so what I thought was like really great, I didn't particularly like certain parts of this episode, but I will say the music was fantastic in this episode, and it just gets
Beautiful.
amplified here. Like when they go into the underworld, it's a cut to the main title, which I think is a great moment to do that. And the music was fantastic leading to it. I really enjoyed that. And so I want to stop here because now we're going to have more or less two plot lines go on from this point. One of the plot lines is the flashbacks with Percy and his mom. And so I just want to ask you, because I think we're going to take this for the Percy and his mom section. We'll go through all their scenes and then kind of get back to the normal story. But what were your overall thoughts on the Percy flashback stuff?
Like everything, I did and didn't like it. It was nice to see more of Sally.
Yep.
It's always nice to see their relationship because of how stressful and just how hard it was for both of them, as you clearly see in these flashbacks. With her trying to go to every place she can, with him trying the ones that are the best, or what was it, 2 hours out of the city, or an hour, something like that. Yeah,
something like that.
It's a good trip away from where they live to help him find a better place to learn. So I liked seeing that because it just shows what we already know, but it really confirms it with her just trying to do what's best for him.
Yep.
Other than the one other big option, which we'll talk about later about this. But it was also nice to see Percy being fed up with it and be like, "No, Mom, why are you doing this? I don't want to go here. Why can't I just be with you?"
It's kind of how a kid would react to the whole situation. Yeah. I mean,
it's how an actual kid would be.
I mean, if you even think about it, like, let's say, your dad or your mom is going to get a new job and you got to move schools. It's like, kids don't understand that. So I thought they did that pretty well. I think the one thing that I like, by the way, I want to say, I thought the flashback stuff was probably my favorite parts of this episode. Because they specifically focus on character building, and I'm a sucker for character building. It's my favorite parts of episodes and, character moments and all that. But the one thing that I, opened up my mind about something is I saw somebody comment something because I put out a post on like what people thought about this episode. And somebody commented something that I found was interesting. It almost kind of seemed like the flashback stuff kind of took you away from what was going on in the story, because this is like basically the climax, in my opinion. Like for me personally, when I was reading it, this was my favorite section of the book, was the underworld and the Lotus Hotel. Like those things, like back to back, this was my favorite part of the story. And so in one part of it, it does kind of take you away from the climax of the story. And one thing I did think about was like, when we watched Lord of the Rings, the extended editions, we went through all of them extended over the last weekend, and this flashback stuff almost felt to me like it was extended scenes, like stuff that wasn't necessarily needed to be here, but it was, and because it added to the film, but it wasn't essential to the episode. So for me personally, I think if you're going to do these episodes in this plotline specifically, I think they should have done it in an earlier episode. Because I think at this point, your character groundwork should probably already be established before you got to an episode like this. Like this episode should more or less be payoffs. It should be almost paying off all the character work you've done throughout the entire story. So I did feel like that is a legitimate criticism, even though I did enjoy a lot of the flashback stuff. I think either you could have done a better job if it was put into a different episode. People would have liked it more, or condensing it down, because I do think like we didn't probably need as many scenes when it came back to the flashbacks. Like I think some of the stuff could have been combined. Like for instance, you could almost just go into it where Sally's talking to, I guess, the principal or whatever, where Percy can hear it and see it, and then get from that scene straight to the scene where they're having like a dinner and Percy goes off. You kind of almost don't even need like that first scene or two, but I don't know. I think for me, I liked it, but we'll kind of go through it. So I think there isn't a ton to really talk about, Logan, on like the first couple scenes. It's more just Percy is protesting, going to the school. We kind of talked about that already. We get into the part where Percy's being turned down from going to this school. And I like it because, again, it shows Percy is this person that doesn't feel like he fits in. He feels like he's just this weird kid that can't learn. He's, being rejected from schools that quite literally are specialized in helping troubled children. I think
Yes.
that's all really good to the character of Percy and showing how devoted Sally is, to him. So all that's really great, but I think the best parts of this is when we see Percy and Sally having basically dessert. And, I really, really enjoyed this part because it's basically Sally telling Percy, sometimes you have to do things for people and they don't even understand why. And it's because you love them. And you have to sometimes make hard choices. And that the reason I like that segment of this part of the story with what episode it's in, and that's kind of the counter argument to kind of the stuff I talked about earlier, is like it connects directly with what happens at the end of this episode or the end of this chapter, where Percy has to leave his mother behind. He has to make a tough choice to save the world. That's a very good character writing strategy for me. Do you have anything else you want to add on that stuff before we get to like kind of like the final stuff with that arc?
No, you summed that up really well. Actually, I'm gonna be honest. I didn't even think about the whole how you. It seemed like they were edition scenes.
Yeah.
That was actually really clever. I would have never thought of that, but that does make sense. They did seem a little out of place in this episode.
Yeah. And it's not to say they're bad, right? I'm not saying they're
Oh,
bad. I
no.
just think their placing is quite interesting given at where we
Mhm.
are in the story right now.
Yeah,
Like,
no, they're not bad scenes at all. But like you said, they shouldn't be still doing character building like
yeah.
this late into the show where there's only one episode left.
Yeah. I honestly think, like, given how short the last episode was, maybe this stuff should have been placed in the last episode.
It
But
definitely would have helped the episode. That's for sure.
because maybe it would have reminded you as a viewer, okay, they're still going to save Percy's mom. It would have given you more of the connection of the characters going into, this episode. And I think, especially given like that we didn't do if you take away the crusty stuff and then also the Percy stuff, you have way more room then to kind of build upon what happened in the book in the underworld. That would have maybe allowed you to do more with it. But I don't know. I'd be interested to see what, you, the viewers, think about that suggestion. But that gets us kind of to the last scene, which is basically Percy's mom, Sally, just having a breakdown, right? Her son has just kind of gone off on her, but she can't talk to him at all, can't explain what's going on. She's having this issue as like, should I reveal it to him and drive him to camp and all that? Should I not? And I think it's so well done because you're thinking on one side of it, you're like, especially, about revealing who he truly is. The other part of it is like, Sally doesn't want to give up her son. Her son's very young, right? Like that, there's that part of it as well, of not having your child. And so that's part of it. But the other part of it's like, she doesn't want Percy to become basically what all these other demigods become, right? How they're all backstabbing each other and going to war and having all these family issues, all that.
Yep.
So you have that, but you also have the problem of like, Percy could end up hating you more or less because you're being very suspicious. You're not, seems like you're listening to him, making him do things he doesn't want to do. So all that was interesting. And then that's that conversation with Poseidon. And I had some reservations about the casting of Poseidon, just seeing what he, looked like and some of that. But I think he did a very good job, kind of showing what Poseidon would be. But I found that one thing it just didn't sit right with me. Is like Poseidon has this monologue, and it's a good monologue into our crew getting back to the beach. But it doesn't really seem right because if you guys remember in the end of the last episode, Percy is basically told that his father tells him to just go home, that he pretty much failed, and he is basically not any help. So it almost feels very contradictory that we come back in this episode and Poseidon's almost the complete opposite. I don't know what your thoughts were on that, Logan, but that's kind of how I read that, which I don't know.
It was very contradicting. I also kind of looked at it as this was how many years ago in the past. So I
Yeah.
can get where like it differs, but for us as the viewer to where one was just a week away from the other,
Yeah.
it does seem very odd to do it that way. And
Yeah.
it still seems odd. I mean, I'm sure that I don't even know how many years you'd say, like 5, 6 years. I guess for the age difference, I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
So it's something like that, I
That
believe.
that's probably like the blink in the eye of an immortal who
Mm-hmm.
is,
Yep.
what would you say,
He's
3,500
very,
years old, something like
very
that?
old.
Like, come on, 6 years, that's like it's like a day or 2 for him.
I mean, that right there is explains exactly why you didn't like Hermes's depiction in the last episode,
Oh
like
my
about
gosh,
Luke.
yes.
That right
Yeah.
there explains it perfectly.
Yeah, I guess it does. It's just, I don't know, I just ugh.
Yeah, it's very weird. Like I liked the
Mhm.
scene, I like what it
Yes.
represents, but I think some things didn't land for me because I'm having again remembering of what happens in the last episode. It just kind of comes off weird.
Mhm. Yeah, it does.
But I do think like if you put that aside and you think about what he's actually saying and how that's transitioning into the actual fade to the actual scene of our group at the beach and Ares right there,
Mhm.
it just set up the next episode well. I will say, like, I think the
It
ending
does.
does a good job of setting you up for the next episode. It is a lot of a cliffhanger. They like to do that in this show.
No kidding.
Um, but yeah, that's more or less this plot line.
Yeah,
It's not huge, right? It's not a huge plot
no.
line, but it definitely was probably the part of the episode I liked the most.
Yes,
But
yeah,
do
I
you have
agree
anything
there.
else before we move on?
I just wanna say it was a nice scene. It was cool to see Poseidon. I do kinda wish, and this is just me being picky as always, I do kinda wish we didn't see Poseidon until the very end of the show, or at least, the next episode, of course. It was nice, but I wish we didn't see him, and it would've been interesting if maybe instead of him coming to Sally, Sally just talking, not really to the milkshake where she put the match in, but just talking that general direction as if she knew he would be listening because he cares about her that much. I feel like that would have been another way to do it. That would have been a little more interesting. And maybe if they found a way to show that he was listening without him walking up and having his whole dialogue, which I still think was good. I just
Yeah.
it wasn't my favorite way of doing it.
Yeah, I think the way you're doing it is more of like how it
How it
would have
should be.
happened in the book, right?
Right?
It's
Because
more following the book logic, and I think that's good. I wish they did more things like that, but
yeah, because they
I don't
never
know.
explain it in the show, but he's not supposed to, father a child. And here he is, not only fathering one, but then going to talk to the mother of said child
Yep.
after the fact, which he probably got his ass chewed out for in the first place.
Yep.
That I that just doesn't work out, and they haven't covered that in the show, so I understand they can have that leeway there, but I just doesn't feel right for me as a book reader.
I mean, even think about it from this regard. If you're the other gods and you see that like this happen, right? You're like sitting here going, Poseidon is visiting this woman. Why is he doing that?
Yeah, hang on, what's
They're
going
not
on?
supposed to have kids.
Wait, he has a son?
Yeah.
Hang on,
So
I wanna go see my boy.
when you really think about it, probably shouldn't have, it most definitely shouldn't have happened because you're putting a big old exclamation mark slash X on Percy, his whole
Yep.
existence. But, it is what it is, I guess. But that gets us back to our plot line with our main trio. We see them go into the underworld, and I did like the actual transition. I wanted to give them a little bit of praise here because we've had a lot of black screen transitions that I've really hated. But they do a great job of doing this transition from Percy locking his mother out and they arguing, and then transitions to present time with Grover in the underworld. I thought that was natural. It felt better. It felt a little bit more creative on how we're switching scenes, so that was good.
Yep.
So, how did you think they did the atmosphere of the underworld? Like, I just visually.
Um, I'm a little mixed on it, once again, like everything. Before I get to that, though, I will say something I found very odd, strange, and confusing is how they get into the underworld. So they got these stairs, I'm assuming, going down to,
Yes, I would assume.
the underworld. And then it shows them using a trap door just randomly placed
Yeah.
out in what is an open field with stairs going up. So out of just pure curiosity, I want to understand how that works. I want to see that in like
Not
a
even gonna
maybe.
bother. I'm not even gonna try.
I just think it's like it's confusing, so I kind of want to know now. But as for the atmosphere, it definitely does give off some creepy ass vibes. I will give you
Yeah.
that. Um, I will say it varies from what I would have thought of doing for the underworld. I'm the typical not really religious, but the best way I'm trying to think of it as the hell from the Bible. You know, everything's
Yeah.
on fire, everything's red, it's death all around. This one, it still has death, but it's more in the sense of being like a just barren, no fire, no nothing. It's dark, but like in a cool color sense instead of a warm color, which I do like, but I still expect, the looks like
Yeah.
you're in the netherworld from Minecraft or something like that. It's all red, it's fiery. So it's interesting. It's not my personal view, but I do like it because in other shows like Lucifer, which now is only on Netflix, sadly, it shows the underworld as freezing. So I thought, everyone has their
Yeah.
own taste and style on it. So it was nice to see a new one, but I still would have liked that original look.
Yeah. I think I'm pretty much in the same boat. Like I didn't hate what they did. It just wasn't what
Yeah.
I would have done if I was running the show. And
Hmm.
I think my takes, way I would have done it would have even been different than yours. Because I think the Percy Jackson movie, some of the atmosphere that they did, when I don't know why, when I imagine the underworld, I just get like a color scheme of like a black, dark blue, purple. So
Okay.
it's just like I don't know, just like that dark atmosphere type of vibe. And this was kind of, so
Yeah.
for me, this was kind of the polar opposite, right? It was very, light color palette. It kind
It
of
was.
almost looks like Dune is like the comparison I almost make on
That
like
is a good one. Yeah.
the sand and stuff. So yeah, it was an interesting take, and I definitely
Mhm.
don't hate it, right? I mean, you could
No,
even
it's not.
make it idea of like, okay, it kind of looks like a desert to some degree. It's like
Yeah. No, it's
that,
a barren waste field.
yeah, that's kind of what you would think of the underworld as. So I didn't
Mhm.
hate it. I didn't hate the way they did it, and I thought it looked good. So
Yeah.
again, they executed it, and I thought it looked good. So I don't really have that much complaints. Just different
It
than
did.
what I
Yeah.
personally thought it like looked like when I was reading the book. But
No,
um,
I do want to say real quick, I do find this rather comical in the like they didn't intend to make it funny, but the one scene or the scenes that you think would be some of the darkest end up having some of the best lighting in the show.
yeah, that's
I
true.
just anytime they're in a dark room, you can't see it unless you're watching in the pitch black with your brightness all the
Yeah,
way up. Meanwhile, everyone watches it probably in the middle of the day or in somewhere with a light on. So I just thought that was kind of funny. This world underneath the living world is bright, and
the best lit of the
you
whole
can
series.
you can actually see there. They're kinda going back to, like, Lord of the Rings instead of having, Game of Thrones lighting, and I was like, "Oh, that's kinda nice for once, but very odd."
Game of Thrones lighting. Don't bring that up again.
Ugh, it's nasty.
That's gonna trigger me all over again. But yeah, I agree though. So we then cut to them cutting through the line of dead people. One thing I will say, I I don't hate that it's just like basically zombies, especially just people that are dead, but it's their actual human body. Like
Mhm.
in the book, it's more like they're like a ghostly form. It's not because there you can go through them. Like if you try to like wave their or not wave their hand, shake their hand, you'll go right through their skin or whatever. So I didn't mind it. I do think again the way I interpret this stuff is a bit different, but we see them cutting in front and they get to Charon, which I was really looking forward to because I think just an interesting figure in Greek mythology. He basically just says they are not dead. And I think this is, again, some of that dark but funny humor because Percy's now done this twice. So I think we need to check if Percy's okay. But Percy says they are all dying to some extent, which is fantastic. It's like, dang, man,
It
my depressed homies, they felt that one.
yeah, it's very Percy of him.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's just like you're going back and it's like you go back to I think it's episode 5 and Percy's like, "Yeah, we're all gonna die." So it's like,
Yeah, no, it's nice
oh,
to hear
dude,
it again. Yeah,
dude, is Percy actually Hades' kid? Because he likes to joke about death a lot.
he does. No, he's just your typical Gen Z depressed kid.
That's true. That's true. I did like that humor. Um,
It
s-
is nice.
Something I didn't like though is so they give Charon the bribe, and that's it. That's the end of Charon. There's nothing more of this character. I'm just sitting here like, okay, dude. The dude got 2 lines of dialogue. They didn't
Yeah,
have him do his signature, putting them on the boat with the other dead
yeah.
souls or whatever.
I wanna raise. Yeah.
Like, this is the one thing the Percy Jackson movie version of this did at least tried to do. They didn't really do Charon's character at all, but
Mhm.
they at least did the scene of them where it's like, oh yeah, you humans have a lot of dreams you throw away or things you don't want. It's polluting the underworld and an annoyance to Hades and all that. It's like just some fun stuff. It's good writing and
Yeah.
it just builds the world, but
I didn't do that in this.
no.
And I do have a comment about his scenes, Charon's. So earlier in the scene, before you get to the line, you see him taking a few new souls across the river Styx.
Yeah.
I don't know if I just missed it or it's only in there for like a frame or two. I don't see the boat anywhere, and I mean that's like his thing, so that was kind of sad.
Well, when you really think about it, right?
Yeah.
It is a wall. Like,
No, there is a wall, but
why
hey
is
man,
there a wall? Like, because you
that's
have to
yeah.
get into that's a whole nother problem that I'm going to talk about when we get to like how Percy, Annabeth, and Grover actually get to Hades' palace. But
Mhm.
they kind of are defeating Greek mythology. That's just not. It's not just a wall. You don't just have a line of people and they're just standing behind a wall. Like it
Yeah.
just
They added little America to this here. Donald Trump's
yeah.
built a wall over here,
This is
but
Donald Trump's version of the underworld.
yeah, yeah, or Attack on Titan if you're one of those fans. Um,
Interesting because it comes from Disney.
oh yeah, but I just found it. I didn't like it because you don't really see the boat. I don't like I
Yeah.
said. I don't know if it's only in there for a little. The wall is unnecessary because
Yep.
the River Styx is more or less the wall, and then the whole thing with the River Styx is that you have to pay to get across
Yep.
that. But in the show, it looks like they're waiting on the outside of the wall to pay because that's when he takes or they attempt to bribe him. So I don't know if they're changing and making it their own mythology because
Which is weird.
the trio knew what to do. So maybe it's just Disney's changing that, which is a very strange thing to change, if you ask me. But
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
just
It's
kind of
weird.
upset me because it was just all so I don't want to say wrong because they can do it however they want, but it just wasn't mythologically or book accurate. And it kind of
Yeah.
it was a little disappointing.
It's just weird because it's like, why again? Greek mythology is pretty much anything you want it to be almost. Like it's not set in
Yep.
stone. Like,
No.
but the fact that like it's in the book, it's in Greek mythology, it's very like, it's one of the popular, I guess, leading ideas of what it was like, what they believed it was like.
Hmm.
And then you just change it, it just seems weird. Though, what the kind of vibes I got from it? You were talking there, and viewers that were looking at my camera saw it probably click in my mind, but for anyone that's played God of War, the new one, this the second one of like the Norse mythology section of God of War, this is almost the same thing as like Asgard. They have this giant wall, and Kratos ends up basically, or not, the Kratos or Atreides, or which is Loki, but well, either way, one of them ends up climbing the wall, whatever. And it seems like the exact same thing. So it's kind of weird when I kind of think about it like that, but yeah, I don't know. So yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of that. But at this point, we see Kerberos come out because, again, they're not dead. So Kerberos is going to kill them. Again, this is very much sped up from what happens in the book. Like there's a whole sequence, but again,
Mhm.
Kerberos appears. I did think right away Kerberos looked pretty good. Like I feel like they nailed the design. For me, it
Oh
worked
yeah.
exactly how it should have been. No no complaints here. It looked great. But we see that Annabeth more or less just starts petting Kerberos, I would assume, and that's what gets him to stop, which I
Mhm.
find
Weird.
somewhat interesting because wouldn't Kerberos just eat you before you got the chance to pet him?
Yeah, she would have
That's
had
what
to get
happens with
around.
Grover anyway.
Yeah, yeah, she would have had to get around at least two giant dog heads.
Yeah.
One normal sized dog is bad enough, but this thing that it can eat you in one bite and you get around two of its heads, I don't know about that. And I'm sure people will be like, "Oh, well, Logan, what about the invisibility cap?" Yeah, I'm sure she had that on or something, but
But
I'm
she didn't
pretty
have it on
sure.
when she was petting him.
Yeah, she didn't have it on when she was petting him, and I get that's how we find out. But I'm also sitting here thinking, well, Kerberos would probably be able to smell her because she still smells like
Yeah.
living. So it's like one of those things where in the book they're like, Annabeth's like, yeah, my hat turns me invisible, but it is nothing compared to something else, which we will talk about in a
Here's
couple
the
of minutes.
best representation, or basically an equal thing of what you just said.
Hmm.
When Frodo puts on the ring, he's not invisible to the Nazgul because the
That's
Nazgul are part of that world.
yeah.
It's that idea, more or less. But yeah, so again, it's hard to not keep bringing up the book because the book version of this is just better. In every way,
Mm,
it's better,
yes,
right?
it is.
Like they have a plan, more or less, and it doesn't work. But Annabeth, she picks up Percy's plan and makes it better. But
Hmm.
more or less, we have Grover gets basically let out of Kerberos' mouth, uneaten or anything, which is just like okay. Um, but then okay, so we're gonna get this moment. I want to talk about it here just because this is when it happens. Apparently, Grover loses his pearl at this point of the story. And again, this is after Grover's been completely useless for I don't know how many episodes. This episode, he blatantly is
All of
like,
them.
is it safe now? And then he loses the one thing he had to keep. Like, honestly, if I was Percy and Annabeth, why would you keep Grover on this adventure and why are you friends with him? Like, he is just a hindrance. Like,
Hmm.
he does nothing. I'm tired of the character of Grover. Like, just go away. They've done nothing with his character. He's a plot device. And then the other part of this is like, so wait a minute. We changed the book lore of them getting 3 pearls to 4 pearls so that
Just to lose one.
Grover could just lose it like this and look like a more of an idiot than he already is.
Yeah, no, I don't like it. They're dogging the third of the trio, who is a very important
Yeah.
character.
This is
Probably my
I would
my second
argue
favorite.
I would argue this is one of the most important books for him. Out of the 5,
Yeah,
I would say this is probably it's not the most important, but it's one of the most important.
it's probably the second most. Yeah,
Yeah.
and my thing is, I'm sorry, but hey, we're going into this underworld, but I have one pearl for each of us to get back instantly. Magic.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Let me just put it in this loose open pocket to where this small ball can just roll out. No,
Yep.
you put it in a pocket that you can open and close, even if it's just a little flap. And it's got Velcro or some shit. I don't know. At least do something smart like that.
Yeah.
Like, come on, that's just some common sense. If someone gave you $1,000, are you gonna put it in your back pocket with the upper half of the dollar or the bills just sticking out? No, you're gonna have that. You're gonna hide it somewhere. You're gonna put it in your front pocket and put your hand over it,
Yep.
or you're gonna put it in your bra if you're a woman. I don't know.
It
I mean, come
just
on, you just gotta be common sense, dude.
the writing here was just terrible. And in my
It was
opinion,
very sad.
this is at this point of the episode, I was very scared. Like after like
Yeah.
because you got to remember, and not the hindsight of what happens at the end because I think some of the stuff at the end helps, especially like the Percy and his mother plot line. But at this point of the
Mhm.
episode, I'm sitting here just like, dude, what is going on, man?
This
Like,
can't get any worse.
there's no logic. We have no logic left in this show. And so at this point, then it gets worse because then Grover just basically picks up Percy and they fly to the top of the wall for the underworld. I'm just in here like, really? This is the best we could do on how they get into the underworld. Like you had the answer sitting in front of you and you went, let's be quirky. Like, because
Let's not be like the book, which is what so many fans want.
I'm just sitting here with like, this is all it takes. Why doesn't anyone that ever goes to the underworld just fly over? Like, if it's this easy, why does none of the humans that are waiting in line that seem to still have a physical presence, why don't any of them try to climb the wall?
Mhm.
It's not
And
like
why didn't
Charon gives a shit.
yeah, he doesn't care, and why didn't the trio do that in the first place?
Yeah,
Like, if you didn't
I
have to pay for it, keep your drachmas, just fly over the wall.
yeah. And then so at this point, I got kind of confused at this because I was like, you see Annabeth start to lose her grip on Kerberos, and that's why he starts basically attacking again. But
Mhm.
then at the same time, she apparently was on Kerberos still, and then also like hung on to the top of the wall. That's what my interpretation of the scene was.
Yeah, she can't hold on to pet him anymore, but she can hold on so he can jump up, I don't even know, more than 60 feet up into the air,
Yeah,
and then is able to get off and grab the wall. I'm sorry, but if you're jumping like that and you have that momentum, like, even if it's just that split second of where you're just, like, still in the air for, like, a millisecond.
yeah.
As soon as your weight hits, you're gonna lose your grip unless you are a pro climber, and there is no way Annabeth's a pro climber, even if she's a daughter of Athena.
Yeah,
This whole part was just so far fetched. I
I think
did not enjoy it.
again, this goes back to what we talked about in the beginning of the episode. I feel like all of the mystery, the allure, the magical element of this world just keeps declining every episode, because then you have like this, like the underworld. This is one of the like coolest atmospheres, coolest places in the entire series. And we've described, how do you get into the underworld? You go into some random like little back door thing, and then you fly over a wall. It's like, okay. I mean, right. I don't understand how very few demigods are able to ever get into the underworld. It seems pretty easy to me, but all right.
You're telling me all the dead people, when Thanatos comes and collects them, he just goes through this waterbed store and just down the janitor's closet?
Oh, something I even forgot to mention with Krusty. Given that Krusty is a son of Poseidon, does it not seem a little odd that he's guarding the entrance to the underworld?
Yeah, that is kind of strange.
It's a show-only problem, but I just,
that makes it even worse of a problem, because at least the book makes sense.
Yeah, well, yeah. But I will say, when they are on top of the wall, I thought it was like a really good atmospheric shot of Hades' palace, like off in the distance. Like
It was.
I thought all of the environmental shots or the big landscape shots this episode were really well done. Even though maybe I didn't agree with the way they designed certain things, because I would have done it differently, I thought the way their interpretation was and how they did it, they at least did a very good job. It took a lot of effort to do that. So I appreciate that.
Yep, it was cool. I do wish that they could have got the view, and I don't know, maybe they'll do it when they go back. But it would have been cool to have the view of the 3 different, I don't even know what to call them, fields or lands, where you
Yeah.
can go when you die in Greek mythology. The good, the bad,
Yes.
the good, the middle, and the ugly, or something like that.
Well, so yeah, it's
I don't know
basically
what to
you
call it.
you have the good, which is like, again,
The
you did
heroes.
good. You have the
Yeah,
middle, which is like, you didn't do anything
everyone.
too good, you didn't do anything too bad. This is just gonna be a majority of people. And then you have your bad people, which is like Hitler. So
Yeah, it's a biblical hell to where you're tortured for the rest of your life, or
yes.
some of the Greek mythology stories, which they do mention in the book for that area.
Yes. So yeah, it'd been cool if we would have gotten more, but it
We'll
is
take
what
what
it
we
is.
can get, I guess, now.
Yeah. Um Again, in my notes, I call Grover an absolute moron for losing the pearl.
Yep.
And so Grover then knows at this point, as they're traveling to Hades' palace, that someone's gonna have to be left behind. Given if we do some quick maths, you have 4 people you want out of the underworld, they have 3 pearls. And so at this point, Grover's like, I should stay behind, I lost the pearl, it was my fault. And Percy is like, nah, if anyone's staying behind, it's gonna be him, and they will get the others will get the bolt back to Zeus and all that. Which again, continues our common theme of Percy is kind of the stereotypical hero type, all that, which is good. We then see basically a bunch of people that are rooted to the ground because of what the choices they made, regret, and things like that. And I've found this whole like section here kind of interesting. Like because we then hear Kerberos in the background. All right. And so Grover and Percy start to run. And within 10 feet, they already lose Annabeth somehow. And so I'm sitting here and I'm like, how the hell did this possibly happen? And we go back and Annabeth is stuck or rooted into this field because of her apparent regrets or something like that. And I get that she would have regrets. Like that makes sense with her background. I just don't get how it works in terms of, shouldn't that only work on dead people? Like, why is that working on alive people? And I'm just confused on how that works, and it's not really explained in the episode at all. So, Logan, I don't know if you have an answer to that, or you have any other takes on that whole sequence.
The only answer I can give that would make any sense, but also absolute no sense whatsoever, is just like time travel. It makes no sense when you try to understand or explain it.
I guess, but I think
that's the only way I can think of it.
I think the reason I hate this more than maybe I would otherwise is because it basically takes Annabeth completely out of this episode, right? Like, because it would have been fine if like we see, oh wow, she gets rooted to the ground, so that means Annabeth has some really big regrets, things that she wishes she did differently, but then our crew's able to get her out, because then it's like you establish the same thing while allowing Annabeth to be part of this episode.
Yep, and I just thought of it. Do they not have magical weapons that they can cut this with? Like I
Again,
just
it's
thought of
not
that.
explained.
I would say it's a magical thing to which only magical things can get hurt by these swords and knives and everything that bite with the celestial bronze. Yet here they are with a magical thing, and they don't
Logan,
think.
I just came up with the perfect solution to this. You know how we've talked about how Grover has no powers? He does nothing.
Mhm.
Grover's main thing is with nature. These are apparently roots that are like trees or something. It still wouldn't make that much sense given that it's the underworld. But if you're gonna like do something stupid and not explain anything, why don't you just have Grover actually use his powers and the way he's able to control nature and have that what allows Annabeth to escape it?
That would have been nice. Yeah,
It would have
I
been better.
honestly
Like,
I don't get why they pull her out here of the episode. Like she
it
could
doesn't
have
make any
been.
sense.
No, it's like it was useless because she just comes back in the end. It's like,
I know.
hey, we're gonna pull your character out for no good reason, no, just no explanation. Just like, hey, we just didn't want you here, so see ya. Just
Yeah.
to have her come back in the last 3 minutes. Like, really?
And part of it is like they say Annabeth's gonna hold Kerberos back, but it's like, how? Like, how? She's stuck to the ground. Is Kerberos just gonna allow her to pet him? Or like I would assume Kerberos would see it, oh yeah, this girl's in the underworld, let's kill her. Like
Yeah, I'm sorry, but
it,
Kirby's is like, oh shit, living. They ain't supposed to be in here. Let me get rid of that real quick. Like,
it just this whole thing doesn't make sense. And we can't again think about this now. It has been since episode 4 when we've really seen the trio actually be the trio for an entire episode and work together. The last two, it was Grover. Grover wasn't really part of the episode, right? He was off having his psychedelic dreams or whatnot. And then the episode before, it was he has to stay with Ares. So now in episode 7, they do the opposite. They get rid of Annabeth for the episode and give us just Grover and Percy. And it's just like they've missed completely on the whole idea that these people are a trio. They are people that are growing, learning how to solve issues together and all these things and building their chemistry. Again, the perfect example is Harry Potter, right? Harry Potter, the first movie, what is the whole end part of the movie or book about? Each one of our characters has a designed skill set that allows them to beat this whole puzzle. Also, even if we want to go deeper into that, it kind of seems a little sketchy the way it's designed. Like Dumbledore even knew that, but it's a whole different thing.
Different subject.
Different subject, but that's the point. Is it's like you have these people that and it just feels like we can never get that right in the show. Like we just have to have only 2 people. And so at this point, we see Grover and Percy, and they start going on their little adventure or whatever. And at this moment, again, we get more great atmospheric shots of them in a desert of sorts. But all of a sudden, Grover starts getting dragged away because of the winged shoes. The shoe again begins dropping him towards this hole, and Percy basically has to help get him out as he's holding on with just his sword in the ground when the shoes fly off of Grover and go into the hole. Logan, did you have anything you wanted to say about this scene?
No, I liked how it looked. It was a very beautiful scene.
Yeah.
But other than that, not really. It was pretty close to the book, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly.
It's
And
more or
so
less what it was, except Annabeth was there. And it
yeah,
was a
I would
bit
say,
longer. Like the chase scene was a bit longer, but that didn't really matter. Like
I'd say this is a scene that it's okay to cut a little shorter.
Like this was how you adapt a scene, right? You make the chase scene much quicker, right? Because you don't need like an extra minute and a half of you just running after Grover, and then you have the same thing happen. It's the same thing happens, doesn't really impact anything differently. It's just you made it more adaptable to the show.
Yeah, made it shorter. Therefore, we could fit more important stuff in.
Yeah.
Cough, cough, taxi scene, cough.
And at this point, so they also do another change here, which again, I actually didn't think this was a bad change. I think it works a bit better the way they do it in the book. But again, I don't think it's a bad one. But at this point, Percy basically finds out that he has the bolt because they hear like a loud clanking noise. It's heavier or whatever. So at this point, they look into his bag. They realize, oh crap, we have Zeus's master bolt. That's not good.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reason I'm a little bit like, why do this here is because I think when you have it the book, right, the main reason for going to see Hades is because they believe he actually has the bolt. Yep. And so they do that, and then the mother part of it is also part of it as well. I do feel like introducing the bolt here, it's kind of like, why don't you just leave the underworld now, go get Zeus's help to get his mother back? But yeah, I do agree. I do think the reason why it would be different in the show, why I don't dislike the scene at all, is because there has been much more of an emphasis put on Percy is just in this for his mother more than he actually is for solving the world issue. So that's why I'm not as against it. So I thought, it was fine that it happens here. I don't know if you disagree with that, Logan, but
No, I agree. It's weird because one, like always, it's not like the book, but it wasn't a bad way to do it.
no,
They definitely, like you said, it was a good way to show that the show version of Percy is more about his mom, which he kind of was in the book, but he was about 60-40 in the book about whether saving his mom
yeah.
and then saving everything.
It was much more
And
balanced, whereas in the
yeah, it was a
show,
lot more
it's
about
definitely leaning way more
mother
to one
only.
thing.
Yeah, and he just cares about mom. Like he understands that he needs to help save the world, or at least a good portion of it.
Yeah.
But he cares about his mom so much more, which I get. But it's very different yet again from the book.
Yeah, another thing, while you were talking, I think works better in the book than it does the show is it's like when we get to Hades, it's a bunch of things culminating at the same time for the reader. So you as a reader, you're trying to comprehend, oh crap, this is Hades, one of the most powerful figures in Greek mythology.
Yeah.
You're also processing that, oh crap, this thing that's been foreshadowed for the last chapter, there's something heavier in his bag, and oh crap, it's the bolt. How did he get the bolt? Well, that was Ares. So all this is coming together. So you're you're basically with how Percy is in the book, where you're very shocked, you're speechless for a second, and then you finally get it out, but Hades doesn't listen to you, so you have to leave.
Yep.
So it does work differently in here because you now have a different approach, where it's Percy's kind of figured out what's going on by the time he gets to Hades. So it's just a different way of reworking that, which I don't, dislike. I just think the reason I didn't like the way they ended up doing it is because I just personally didn't like the interpretation of Hades, but we'll get there when we get there. Yep. But at this point, Percy kind of realizes that Ares has stole the Master Bolt and that he's working with Hades. At this point, they believe that Hades is still involved, but that he just doesn't have the bolt yet or something like that. Again, I don't think it's a bad interpretation. I think it makes logical sense and all of that. But at this point, we see Percy and Grover enter the palace, which I'm almost mixed on, because I think when you think about Hades as a character, you would assume him being one of the most powerful figures, he would want this really cool decked out palace. And in that regard, it doesn't look as richly as I think, it's kind of described in the book, or, that kind of stuff. But I did think it was cool on the outside, and it was cool on the inside as well. I don't know if you agree with that, Logan.
Yeah, it looked pretty cool. It definitely matches the kind of vibe I was getting from the portrayal of Hades himself, looking like some semi-hipster college teacher.
Yes.
That wasn't 100% what I was getting from him, but it's definitely what I was getting, because the quote unquote palace has a whole bunch of holes in it. And I could see somebody staring at it going, wow, that's a beautiful piece of art right there.
Yep.
I understand it, all the feelings and emotion when the creator made this. I look at it, I see there's a lot of holes in that thing. That's not good.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I look at a very practical sense, so I thought it was strange. I prefer the book version, but I also like that they didn't do the book version, because the book version, they say it's an exact replica of Olympus.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh yeah, he does that because he's not invited there." If I wasn't invited to something, I wouldn't want to have a copy of it. I'd want my own thing and say, "Look at this. This is definitely better than your thing."
Well, Logan, I agree with that point, but I know we're going to have a conflicting view on something, and that's going to be very vital to something I'm going to talk about later. But
fair enough.
I will say, so we get to Hades' throne room and all of this, and I think right from the get-go, you can tell it's a different tone. It's a very different take of what they're going with the character of Hades, because in the book, it's very serious. It's a very dark tone. They come into the throne room. Again, the door is already open to them, and they see Hades on his throne. And instantly, Percy, again, it's very similar to what we talked about with episode 5, where Ares in the book gives off this vibe of being someone you want to punch. He instantly makes you more angry and want to be more violent. Hades is just a overpowering force. You get that aura from being around him. Percy quite literally has a line that he thinks about in his head in the book where A part of him wants to just lay down and basically die. Like,
Mhm.
that's the vibe here.
I mean, he's one of the big 3.
Yeah.
First off, he's a god to start, which Percy has only met a couple in his, what should we say, 3 weeks now of knowing that he was a demigod or something like that, still maybe 2.
Yeah.
But not only is it a god, it's one of the big 3 gods,
Yep.
one of the big bros. Like, wow, that is I know they didn't show the Ares at all really in the show, but this they definitely should have showed us something more in this scene.
Yeah, so
There's so
this
great.
is my biggest problem is because Hades comes out and he's not like that at all, right? So
Mm-mm.
Hades, this is a character that has just lost his symbol of power, right? Like his tool to inspire fear. And that's what Hades is all about. He's about fear. He doesn't get love, right? He's the god of the underworld, of death. People don't like him. So fear is his biggest tool. And so when that's taken from him, understandably in the book, he's pissed off. And not only that, it's like people are using him to start wars because they believe that Hades could have stolen it or whatnot. And so I think the way I interpret this character is he should be much more angry. He should have more emotion to the character. And so when the character comes out and he's very calm, he gives you like a 20s hipster college professor type character. I just, right away for me, it's not, again, this is my interpretation. This is how I view how the character should be. And he comes out and it's just not anything like what I was thinking the character should be.
No. Yeah, no. The only thing I was really scared about when I saw him walk out was, oh my gosh, he's going to tell me my paper has plagiarism in it, and I've just lost all my scholarships, and I am
Yeah.
getting kicked out of college. That was the scariest part of him.
And so that's the biggest problem is because there's some other parts I want to talk about. So let's get into it. So at this point, Percy just instantly wants to see his mom, and Hades is like, okay, well, follow me, and I'll show you. We see Percy's mom in a golden statue, which I will say I did like the version that the movie went. Like the movie
Yeah.
had it where it was like it's still her soul, it's still her like her essence, right? It's there. It's not just like, oh yeah, she's frozen in a statue. Kind of like that a little bit better. It kind of just adds more to the vibe that like Hades is in control of death. He's in control of life, all those things.
Yep.
Hades says he saved her life, which is kind of insane, but
Yeah.
okay.
Very, very opposite of what he would probably do.
Given that like he wanted Percy to come here, it was all of a setup to begin with, but okay. But then we get to this point where it's like Percy says he can't give Hades the bolt and that it doesn't belong to him because basically the trade was Hades was going to take the bolt and that would give him his mother back. And Hades says he knows nothing about the bolt and is not working with Ares, which again, this comes as a big reveal, right? As a viewer, you're like, okay, wait, Hades is not involved with this at all. Something else is going on, and it starts getting everything going. And Hades says he does not want the bolt. He wants the Helm of Darkness, which, again, for me personally, I get why Hades is maybe saying that, but at the same time, the way this kind of plays off in the book is like, Hades wants his helm more than anything, but if you're going to give him the bolt and bring it to the underworld, he'll take that too, right? Because he can bargain with that to possibly get back that. So again, I thought that was just a minor thing, but it's something that I was like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, it was a little strange. And then also, I've been saying this a decent amount with this show overall, and just even the books and the movies. I found this very strange. He sends his Furies after Percy, once before
Yeah.
he finds out everything, and then after he finds out everything. If I had the lightning bolt and or the helm of darkness, right? That's the name of it.
Yes.
Yeah. You think if I was getting hunted, I would use it so that they couldn't
Yeah.
find me. Like if Annabeth's invisibility hat works, what do you think the Helm of Darkness, the OG version of
Yes.
this with better quality would do? Like, come on.
I do agree. I think Hades should probably be thinking a bit more about that. It's like, wouldn't he be using these tools if he had them? But,
Yeah.
But I think this is almost my biggest issue is so Hades notes that he doesn't want a war because Percy's like, well, you would want a war, right? You're the god of death and souls and all these things. You'd want that. And Hades is like, nah. But the reasoning is almost completely different. So in the show, they almost play it off as like, he's not a jealous type, right? He doesn't, want these wars and not what all. He's perfectly happy in the underworld, which is like, okay, but that's a big problem when you look at the characterization of Percy throughout the entire story. Like in the story of Percy Jackson, Hades is more the prototypical what he is kind of in Greek mythology, where he's resentful towards Zeus and Poseidon because when they all drew straws or whatever of where their domains were going to be in the world, he got the shittiest one. Like he got the shittiest one. He was in a bad spot and he got the underworld. And then so part of that is like Hades talks about in the book, like, oh yeah, it's very tough to do that, right? With more death coming in, you have to organize new places to put all these people and all that. And so Hades is very discontent, let's just say. Plus, you also have people already judging him, thinking he's the one that's starting all this conflict when he's done nothing.
Yep.
And so all of that is important when we get to like book 5, because it's a major point of, I can't really say anything, but like book readers, you'll understand like what I'm talking about, like of his, arc in that book. It's important because these are just major things on why he does certain actions later on. So this isn't necessarily a bad thing for this episode or what's happening right now, but going forward, it's a really bad thing. Did you have anything else you wanted to comment on that, Logan?
I did. I agree with your whole statement. It's not a big deal right now, but it is going to be a bigger deal if they continue this up into like series, 5 seasons. But I get the feeling, and a lot of people have been doing this lately, movies and shows. They're making what has always been known as the bad guy. They're trying to turn him into he's just a misunderstood guy. Which I don't know how I feel about.
I get that, but I actually think when you look at Hades' character in Percy Jackson, he's pretty much what you said. He is a very misunderstood character. He's someone that has an actual character arc, which is insane given how little screen time he has, or book pages time, I guess.
Yeah.
He actually has a very interesting character arc, and he's not just like a one-note character. In book 1, he's a one-note character because you don't get much of him. But as the story goes on, like he's a very, I don't know.
He starts to change and develop.
Yeah.
Which I probably should have clarified this a little better. In the first book, that's what he is. He's just the bad guy. He needs to stay that way. It's kind of like Snape in Harry Potter. Like,
yes.
Oh, he's the big bad guy. He's got to be the one doing all this. Oh shit! It wasn't him.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, and they keep going, and they still think it's him, and then eventually they're like, okay, there was no way it was him now.
Yeah. And
which they eventually get to. And the same thing with the Percy Jackson. It's just they try to do it within the first season or the first book.
It's like, why?
It's a little early there.
You're cutting off future plot lines, and it's just annoying.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I'm a big sucker for the villains, so when you start messing up my villains, it just bothers me. But yeah, so at this point, which I really hate that Annabeth isn't here for this, because when Percy realizes that, oh wait, this was Kronos. Well,
oh my god,
Annabeth, Annabeth is a big part of that reveal, or of that whole section of the story. And so completely just not having part of this is just insane to me, because Annabeth is the character that's supposed to be really smart. She's the person that should be able to figure these things out. And so when you have one of the biggest moments that would be for Annabeth helping figure out what's going on, and you don't have her here, it just feels wrong. It just feels this massive reveal, the biggest thing we've been leading up to in the entire story, and we don't even have all three characters here. It's just, I don't know.
It sucks. And my thing is, don't get me wrong, I know who Kronos is in Greek mythology, and I'm sure a decent amount of people who know what little Greek mythology, not including from Percy Jackson, they might know who he is. But it just kind of pisses me off that he knows who Kronos is almost instantly.
Yep.
But he doesn't know who Medusa is.
Yep.
It's just another one of those small things that just really it just really irritates me. It's not right.
I agree.
It's messed up.
But again, I just think, I don't know if I would have had this happen here. But so more or less, Percy is saying this because he wants Hades to maybe help him, right? Figure out what's actually going on. And Hades is like, nah. He actually goes the opposite. He's like, well, I will protect you, your mother, Grover, from Kronos. and all of that, which is kind of interesting, honestly, because I don't think Hades would actually do that. But also Hades then says, "Give me the Master Bolts," and that'll happen. So I do find that interesting because that it would actually assume that Hades believes them, which is also interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Given that all Percy says is, "Oh yeah, I had some dreams," and I'm assuming it's Kronos. So, and also that you got that Grover almost got attacked by, or almost died to Kronos, more or less. So, I do think it's like, I don't know if I was in Hades' position, I would actually believe that. Because again, Percy is trying to get his mother back for free, more or less, without giving anything up. So, I would probably question that if I was Hades, but
Yeah.
I
Oh
don't
yeah,
know.
definitely. Because all of a sudden he just trusts him, right? He trusts
Yeah.
Percy right off the bat. Yet he still thinks, or at least I would hope he still thinks, that Percy has his helm.
Yes.
Or at least he did 2 seconds ago. So he just went from like, "Nah, you lying. I know you have it," to, "Oh yeah, I totally believe that was Kronos." Yep.
But,
And then, sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, with the whole thing with Kronos, maybe it's not important because they don't really explain it, but he's just off saying Kronos' name like it's no big
Yeah.
deal.
They don't
If I
explain
remember
anything
correctly,
about that.
yeah, in the book, it's just like saying Voldemort in Harry
Yes.
Potter world. Like it's
Again,
like,
very similar to
shut
Harry
up,
Potter.
shut up, yeah, shut up. You don't say that. It's he who shall not be named, or big bad guy, or whatever they call
Yeah.
him in Percy Jackson. Like, I
I
kind of
mean,
wish they kept that.
it's very similar to like you don't say the Furies in the underworld.
Yeah,
It's very
thank you. Yeah,
similar.
yeah. I forget
Um,
what they call them in the book. The something ones.
it's
The kind ones?
it's the kindly ones. That's what it
The
is.
kindly, yeah, that's what it was,
Yeah.
yeah. Like,
Um,
you
but yeah, I
it's
agree.
just, yeah, weird.
And I get it. Like if you're someone that knows anything about Greek mythology, you know who Kronos is. But if
Mhm.
you don't, like if you're going into this show blind, that
There's
doesn't mean
no
anything to
explanation.
you. But
Yeah.
like you're just like, who the hell is Kronos? Is like, is that another god or is that some monster? Like, what is that?
Yeah.
And
What's a
so
Kronos?
hopefully they explain that or explore that a little bit more for people that are casual viewers that don't know what that means. But yeah, they definitely should explore it in the next episode, given that they
Oh, I hope
adapt
so.
the scene correctly. But, that's something for later.
Ooh, if they don't explain it, what we could do is make our own little mini series explaining all the names and the creatures and people they meet in the show, and we can explain for them so they can
Fair.
better understand this. Yeah. There you go. Look at that.
That's fair. I
Yeah,
mean,
be helpful.
yeah. But at this point, um, Hades just says he wants the bolt to deal with Kronos. He wants to be prepared. At this point, Percy pulls out the pearl. Again, there's some great music, by the way, during this entire section. And Percy has a very heartfelt moment as he has to basically leave his mother behind. Again, it ties in really nicely with the theme of the other plotline going on that we talked about. It works as a very emotional scene. It's better than what the movie did by a lot, in that regard at least. But at this point, we get back to, again, this kind of cuts into that monologue with Poseidon, and he's talking about he's going to be there for Percy when he needs it. And we see Percy and Grover pop up at the beach, the Santa Monica beach, because the pearl returns to where it came from, more or less.
Mhm.
And it's a really awkward scene because Annabeth just appears. Like it just feels awkward the way it's all dealt with, because Annabeth is just there and you're like, has she been waiting for them for like this whole time, just staring Ares down, or has she, like, what's going on here?
I mean, they're close enough to each other. They can't, or they're not close enough to actually like do anything to each other, but they're close enough. They could be yelling at each other. So has she just been like calling him names this whole time and him saying it back, or are they just staring at each other and like just walking? It kind of kind of makes me think of Star Wars: Phantom Menace when Obi-Wan is in between I don't even know what to call it, the red shields, the reactors, or
Yeah.
whatever they're called, and they're just staring each other down, him and Darth Maul. Like, I
Yeah.
feel like that's what the scene is, just without the barrier,
Yeah.
and it's just confusing. It's like, why aren't they doing anything?
Well, I think it's even more confusing if you're Annabeth, because you're sitting here and you're like, wait a minute, she doesn't know that Percy has the bolt. She doesn't know anything about this Chronos plot that's just happened.
Yeah, she
She
doesn't
has
know.
no idea what they just talked about with Hades.
Yeah,
She
they don't know
also can
Ares is
already
the bad guy.
infer that they got the bolt or whatever. Like, so this is so confusing because, well, Annabeth does think that Ares is the bad guy because Grover
Well,
Grover more or less told her that, oh yeah, Ares
Yeah.
had Clarice steal the bolt. So she knows he's at least part of the problem.
No,
It's not the right reasons.
yeah, no, I believe that, but at the same time, it's Annabeth. Without like the daughter of the goddess of wisdom, without like pure proof evidence, I feel like she
Yeah.
wouldn't be 100% set on that. I mean, maybe Ares with his sword just standing there getting ready to swing at whatever, maybe she'd put that together. But at the same time, I'd be like, what in the world is he doing here?
That's a great point, right? Because why would he be here? If you're in Annabeth's mind, because you're like, yeah, he may be the one that like had the bolt stolen, but like, what does that have to do with us? Like that doesn't. So yeah, that is gonna be interesting. I'll be very interested to see how they tie that in at the beginning of the next episode. Like, is there any type of conversation the group has before we see something happen? I guess I won't spoil it, but I feel like it's pretty obvious. But
yeah,
I'll be interested to see what they do there.
Yep.
But I will say, they ended on a decent note, right? Setting up the fight with Ares.
they did.
And yeah, so we're at the end of the episode. Logan, what would you give the episode out of 10?
Ooh, probably 6.5. If I could do half points, just because some of it was actually pretty good. I did like some of it. Like you said, the soundtrack was good. Some of the scenes were beautifully made. Some of the explanations, like the moments with Sally that we don't get in the book, I enjoyed. But everything in the underworld was just very painful for me. Or for the most part, it was very painful.
I think to me, if this quality of an episode was at any other point of the story, I might have been a little bit more lenient. But given that this is the climax for me of the story, it's my favorite part of the book outside of the Lotus Hotel. They're about equal. They're by far my favorite two parts of this book.
Yep.
All they had to do for me for this episode to have worked was for me to have a somewhat reasonable depiction of Hades that like was accurate to the book or was accurate with like Greek mythology. And then they did this, and I was just like, okay, I can't give this episode any higher than a 6. So I'm at a 6. I think this is the first time I've been under you when it comes to a rating. So that's kind of insane. But
that's new right there. That really
usually I'm like 0.5 or like a point higher than you. But yeah, I wasn't a big fan of this episode. I think it did slightly better than the last episode. Like it had things that I was like, okay, that was a good addition. I liked that was here. Mm-hmm. I think this episode had a little bit more interesting things going on in terms of visuals, music, even acting performances. Mm-hmm. It's just the writing held this episode down for me so much that I couldn't give it more than a 6. Like it was a very okay episode.
Yeah, it was still a major letdown.
Yes.
But it was better than last episode.
I mean, put it this way. If you go back to episode 5, you go to the ending, me and Logan said, this is where the episode should start getting really good. Or the series should start getting really good. This is what we are most excited for. Yes. These are the episodes the whole season's building towards. The last 2 episodes have been our lowest rated of the entire season.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. And I went on the rant last episode, so I won't do it again, but it's embarrassing to
It is embarrassing. It makes me question the writing team behind the show. It makes me question it.
Yes. It almost makes me think we were too quick to judge the movies.
I wouldn't go that far. They were
not yet, but hey, with the way it's going, I feel like episode 8 might make us think that.
Maybe, but I mean, that's a whole rabbit hole. But I mean, like movie 2, they were doing movie 5 plot lines, or book 4 plot lines.
I'm talking about movie 1.
Movie 1?
Either way, yeah,
they did a lot of stupid stuff in movie 1.
Yeah. Either way, what I'm saying is this is just way too close for comfort. They knew that the movies were horrible and to avoid what they did. But they're still doing something just like it. Like, it's not exactly as bad, but it is just parallel to it.
I think the biggest issue, and I think why we give it so much criticism, is because when you have on your writing staff, and what we're being told, what Disney is selling to us, is that Rick was a very instrumental part of this writing process, and that they were trying to be more accurate to the books than the movie. That's kind of the pitch. It almost feels like Disney Star Wars when it comes to the sequels, where it was like Force Awakens, the entire marketing campaign behind early Disney Star Wars was, we're going back to the originals. We're going away from the prequels. So it just feels like, okay, if you're going to make those claims, you better back it up. And so I think that's why there's more expectation for the show than I think there was for the movie. I think that's the way I would look at it.
Yeah, no, that does make sense, and that is how it's seeming.
But yeah, let us know what you guys think down in the comments below, and we will see you guys for the last episode. Hopefully we continue to rise up, I guess, and yeah, we'll see you next week.